What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the DFS Pick 6 Show, Week 18. Throwing a curveball to you guys today. I am Brit Devine, filling in for the one and only Mean Dean Shavleton. Hope Dean is back next week for you guys here. And another curveball, that is not J Daigle. That is TJ from RotoGrinders here, filling in for Mr. Daigle. Having some, I don't know what this man was trying to do. A show from India when he's out having a good time. Not Indiana, people. India. He's out having a good time. Was having some problems. Couldn't get in today. TJ filling in at the last second for him. TJ, we all know you. Thanks for filling in, dude.
Of course. Happy to be here every week, but on the front side of the camera this time feels a little weird. But no, I've already done, I think, 2 shows today. Got about 2 or 3 every day for the next about 2 weeks. So we're ready to keep it rolling and talk some Week 18. I'm admittedly less prepped than I think Daigle usually is for the shows.
I would assume so. These are 2 of the goats, Rich and Daigle. And speaking of Rich, it's been I think I did a show with you a long time ago. Happy to be back on here. This is one of the few things I think I tweeted out early in the year to somebody. I listened to the Pick 6 every single week. You and Daigle are great. Dean's great too. One of the few things, there's like 1 or 2 other shows I listen to throughout the industry every single week. Make it a point to listen to this because of you, Reeb. So I'm glad to be doing the show with you today, buddy.
I appreciate it. I mean, I feel bad that, we tagged both of you guys in for this, immaculate Week 18. When you just look at the amount of the starting quarterback names we already have this week, Tanner McKee, Carson Wentz, Jimmy Garoppolo, Josh Allen's going to start, but we're going to see Mitchell Trubisky most of the game. Bailey Zappi was already announced the starter. We're probably going to get another week of Spencer Rattler, even though Rizzy keeps telling us Derek Carr might play this year, but that's not going to happen. We already have Mac Jones starting. Josh Dobbs is going to be starting. Mac Jones has already been starting. Aiden O'Connell starting. Like, this is just an absolute travesty. Tyler Huntley starting. It's like, oh my goodness, this slate is just incredible right now.
And I know you guys talked about it last week, where your fantasy championship is week 17. Imagine if you're in a league where it's week 18. I think we need to do fantasy championships in week 15. I think from now on. Like, do we need to move it up? Do we need to lose a week from these, Reebs? Because it's just getting ridiculous at the end of the year now.
Last week, I think what made last week worse for a lot of gamers that were playing their championships was the staggered schedule. Like, on my Sunday chat, I had a lot of people that were they had complaints that, they had, like, Tajay Spears was announced the starter on Friday, but 3 games had already happened, and there was no so we found out guys were out when already 3 to 6 games were played, and it's tough because if you were someone that maybe wanted to bench a guy like Joe Mixon on Christmas Day, you maybe didn't have that luxury, because you just didn't know who was in and out of the lineups yet. So I think the staggered schedule really is what made last week really kind of, I think, annoying for gamers. Next week, it'll fall back on a Thursday. I'm assuming that we're going to get like a triple header on that Thursday. So we'll probably have 3 Thursday games and 3 Saturday games, then the condensed Sunday slate again. But yeah, it was an unfortunate week, I think, for a lot of people, just with the guys kind of in and out of the lineups on different days.
Yeah, we're going to continue to get that as they get more games, more
more
Netflix, more all of that stuff. Yeah,
wait till there's week 19, guys, and you think about this week 18 being bad.
More football is better. Anytime there's more NFL games, I'm definitely down for that. All right, so let's so normally there's like this movie talk. We are suspending movie talk. One, I'm not a movie buff like Dean and like Reebs and Hribar, like Daigle. So we're going to suspend that till next week when hopefully the whole crew can get back together and they can do all that. I know TJ like his movie talk, but instead of that, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some football games on Saturday. We're going to do this for a few minutes with players that actually are going to be playing that we want to use in fantasy lineups. Now, unfortunately, it's a main 2-game slate. You can play one of the secrets to DFS if you want to play a little softer slates is you play the Saturday, you play the all-game slate. You get to play against generally weaker opponents. A lot of the hardcore people don't end up playing those. So I'm in a bunch of those. So, Reebs, let's talk about this. The first game, Cleveland, Baltimore. What are we doing here? Is this a minus? Yes, it is a minus 20 spread. Is there any way the Ravens lose this? Can I just tack this on as a free play to every bet I make this week?
I got to say quickly before we get too deep into the football aspect, it is simply audacious that we are not getting to talk about movies after I've won the Pick Six tournament 3 out of the last 4 weeks. Like, I start the year cold, and now I'm just taking this thing down every week, and we don't get to do the movie reviews. I'm sick. I'm gonna assign 2 movies next week instead of just 1.
I'm gonna watch the one that you assigned. It looked pretty cool. I got into The Last of Us, and the actor from that is very good. And then any movie with Nicolas Cage, I'm gonna tune into that. Maybe I'll guest spot on the next one, and we can discuss it on the late Wednesday or Thursday night for that. But yeah, back to football. The Ravens. What are we doing? Derrick Henry. If it's a 20-point spread, what are the expectations here? The Cleveland quarterback situation. Looks like Bailey Zappi is going to start. Their total is 11, Reebs. This is like the lowest I think I've ever seen. I don't have an Excel spreadsheet like you do that can probably go back that far. Is this the lowest team total in basically NFL history?
No, well, the Kendall Hinton game was, I think the Broncos had a 9.5 point team total, an implied team total. I'll have to go back to see if there's anything lower than that. But the Kendall Hinton game, always, I remember. This is also the first time since 2020 that a team is double-digit dogs to a team they already beat during the season, because the Browns beat the Ravens, in the Jameis's first start. So it's kind of rare territory that we even have this line. Somehow the line actually went down even further. It went from 18.5 to 20 without Dorian Thompson-Robinson, who is certifiably the worst quarterback that's ever played in the past 2 years of football. So I mean, I can't believe Bailey Zappi actually turned this line another 1.5 points.
It can't be any worse.
Which is wild for a guy that's averaging 4 yards per pass attempt with one touchdown and 11 interceptions now over his 200 pass attempt sample in the NFL. Absolute crazy. But yeah, I mean, this is a tricky spot because we have a few spots like this week. I think when we get later too, and we talk about some of the positional plays and like the Buccaneers, right? So we have these games where we have a team that needs the win. The Ravens need to win this game to lock up the AFC North. They become the 3 seed if they win this game. And, you say, all right, well, they're going to probably take care of their business, but is there a point of this game where like the dogs are kind of called off, so to speak? Do we not see Derrick Henry get like the full run out? Because remember that game a couple Monday nights ago where the Saints played the Packers, and it was like 34-0, and kind of no one really did good for fantasy in a 34-point game for the Packers because they just kind of like meandered their way through, and like those outcomes exist, but you always have to say, like, operate under the umbrella, like, if the team's going to score 30, you have to assume like some of the stars were a part of that team scoring 30 points. So it always makes it a little bit tricky to kind of walk through these spots. It's tough to leave a guy like Lamar Jackson on the table just because you think they're going to boat race a team. So it just a little bit tricky. And this game directly impacts the second game on the Saturday slate, which is pretty wild because Mike Tomlin, the way they scheduled this is really weird. Mike Tomlin said they're not anticipating sitting anybody, but again, what happens in the middle of the game if TJ Watt has comes up a little bit lame or something? Do they start pulling guys from that game if the Ravens handle the Browns game? It's just a really weird scenario the way they set up the schedule.
Yeah, the Steelers, just so you know, if the Ravens win, the Steelers, I think they still want to win because then they would play the Texans in the opening round instead of having to play the Ravens again, which you most definitely would not want to do. So the Steelers do have pretty much everything to play for in that game. If you had to pick your favorite quarterback for this little 2-game slate, you want Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Burrow playing basically, I think, almost the best quarterback position. There is some really the elite quarterbacks. It's not the yards. It's not like Drew Brees is throwing for 5,000 yards. That's not really happening in the NFL anymore. But the elite quarterback play has been really good between Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson. You can throw in a couple other players for weeks in here, but these guys are great. They're not turning the ball over. They're sort of dual threading, not really Joe Burrow anymore, but he's just distributing the ball so well. And when you have Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, you would expect your quarterback to do pretty well, even if he's mediocre, let alone a skill set of Joe Burrow. Who would you want to play in this slate?
I think the second game still is just a lot more appealing because it's got the tight total. I mean, Bengals are favored, which is pretty interesting because they were never in the game at home, really, in the first time these teams played. I believe it was at one point in the fourth quarter, it was 41-24. They were down. They had some garbage time production from Burrow, but Burrow's thrown 3 touchdown passes or more in 8 straight games. So like, he's going to have to throw it. And we might not have Chase Brown in this game either.
Yeah.
So you expect from a drop back stance, the Bengals are going to be throwing in this game. From a defensive matchup, it's not necessarily great, but we've seen over the past month, the Steelers face good quarterback play and give up some fantasy points to to quarterbacks like Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Burrow himself, even though some of that was kind of, like I said, like, influenced by some of the game script in that game. But I think the late game, just from an implied stance, just looks a lot more competitive and looks to have a lot more like full game run out.
Yeah, you're not going to get, if Baltimore's up 30-3 at halftime, sure, there's probably a defensive touchdown in there. There's probably a couple of short field touchdowns in there on the offense, maybe not a lot of yards. Are they good? They're not going to run out Derrick Henry if they're up 30-3 midway through the third quarter, where you'd probably see them sitting, where you're very likely to see the starters for the full game in the Cincinnati and Pittsburgh game. What do you make of Joey Porter Jr. coming back today? I saw a little blurb and it said he said he's expected to see a lot of T. Higgins in this game. So from the receiver standpoint, is there anything standing out between those? I did bet over on Scores and Odds. There was a nice line on FanDuel on Jamar Chase's 8.5 receptions. They were giving some really good plus money on that one. If that sticks, do you want to take T. Higgins against JPJ, or do you want to roll with Jamar Chase against everything else the Steelers have?
Yeah, we've got Chase also sticking for the Triple Crown. Fighting for the Triple Crown, which he probably already has locked up, basically. Although when we talk about this Vikings game later, maybe Justin Jefferson could put up a really crooked yardage number.
Those Detroit numbers are insane when he plays in Detroit
to close out the season. But yeah, I mean, you like the matchup, I think, for Chase more, just because he moves around a little bit in the formation. But that was the case last week. Remember, with against the Broncos, you're like, all right, Chase is moving the slot basically 30% of his snaps. He's going to get away from Surtain, and it's still Higgins, just doing damage on Riley Moss. So do the Bengals find a way to still scheme these guys away? Because when we talk about these man coverage splits, it's not like Joey Porter Jr.'s, even if he does have like the shadow report on him, we're talking like 30-40% of the snaps basically that he's going to be directly in man coverage on a player. So I always tend to just not really like go into the weeds on the cornerback, like wide receiver stuff too much, because we've seen, especially in this era of the NFL, it just doesn't hold a lot of weight.
What's your tea leaves read? You read the tea leaves right on Daigle not being here. What's your tea leaves on Chase Brown? Is he going to suit up, not practicing at all week? If he doesn't, where does Herbert rank for you? I would think they just would lean even more on Joe Burrow in the passing game. That was sort of another thought on why I had taking a Jamar Chase over, that they would just go full Joe Burrow, full passing game. What do we make of that situation? I guess if Chase Brown plays, we know probably isn't going to get 100% of the carries like he normally would. But if he sits, what can we expect from Herbert? What type of player is he for some of the people that might not be familiar with his game?
Yeah, TJ said he wants to talk about some Khalil Herbert too.
We're 14 minutes into the show and you haven't even said hi to me yet, Brit. You're killing me.
Well, you said you weren't prepared. I'm giving you a couple of minutes to catch up and get ready.
I've got a lineup built. I got shells of strategy ready to go. I'm all set.
Yeah, the two game slate in general, that's like TJ's wheelhouse, especially.
TJ, what would you do there for, let's say Brown's out? How are you handling Herbert?
So I think one of the ways, the most interesting way to handle this type of game is to load up on some Baltimore backups so that I can just stack Joe Burrow to the absolute fullest with, like, Khalil Herbert. I'd play in every lineup if Chase Brown's going to be out, but then you can run the Burrow, Herbert, Chase, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Mike Gesicki all in one lineup and play some Keaton Mitchell, Rasheen Ali. It didn't work in the last week when we tried to do it, but if there's ever going to be a mega blowout, it's going to be this one. If they ever just rest Derrick Henry for a second half, it's going to be in this one if they're already up 28-0. And so a super electric back like Keaton Mitchell at 4,300, probably going to be pretty low owned considering a 2-game slate. He had 11 touches in his last game. Or 11 rush attempts, 12 touches. And so if we get another blowout type scenario, no Justice Hill, I think this could be a big Keaton Mitchell week. And like Khalil Herbert may end up being the most expensive running back I play.
Yeah. What do you think of that, Reeves? Some Baltimore backups that 30-3 halftime, right, where there is a defensive touchdown, where there's a couple short field touchdowns, but not a lot of yards. Is that something you would take a shot on? Certainly viable.
Yeah, you just need to basically have the run out with your your Bengals stack if you do that, and then the Steelers on the other side too. I mean, remember this is a team that scored 40 points the first time these teams played. Russ threw for 400 yards. So we've seen that this Bengals defense, especially this Bengals defense, when they travel too, not really be up to giving really stopping anybody. So. You've got George Pickens. We're starting to see Jalen Warren take over the backfield too for Pittsburgh recently, and he got kind of banged up last week. So that's another spot too where we could see a guy like Jalen Warren be in play. So yeah, I mean, like I said, that second game definitely is where you want to focus on. So if you just want to get like a cheap piece of the Ravens and just hope to luck box into a touchdown or like a run out from Keaton Mitchell in the second half, that's kind of like how you squeeze in all the pieces of that second game.
All right, so that's going to do it for the quick little Saturday talk. I want to ask you, well, I'll get TJ's opinion on it too, but Reeves, your memory on these things is immaculate. So it's incentive week, and we see these things all over the industry. Everyone's talking about some of these incentives. What's your take on, Mike Evans, 5 receptions, 85 yards for $3 million? That's, his prop, I think, opened at around like 88 or 89. It's shooting up into the mid 90s and things like that. Do you recall, are these things we need to be paying attention to? Geno Smith has some big incentives too. There's a lot of other players with smaller ones. Is this like something we need to be targeting in lineups, or is this just like some nonsense that we can talk about all week on social media?
I mean, you got to be careful. I think you got to pick and choose the spots. I mean, obviously, when you look at like the Mike Evans situation, he's got this record that's definitely important to them. We've heard Baker Mayfield talk about it. They're also a team that's playing for something, playing to win the division. So there is some kind of like correlation there where you can kind of get to it. But there's like some of these other ones that are like tougher to chase, right? Like, everyone getting to 1,000 yards. Not everyone gets to 1,000 yards. I mean, they would love to get these guys all to 1,000 yards, but that doesn't always happen. So you kind of be careful and pick those spots. But some of these incentives are going to be like a little bit more layups. Like there's a couple that are like farther down the line. Like Zach Ertz needs like 9 catches, right? For like a part of his bonus. Like 9 catches aren't free. Like you just can't, like you just don't get those. So that one's a little bit tougher to chase. Like Tony Pollard needs 2 touchdowns, right? Mm-hmm. Like these are things that probably aren't going to happen, right? So you got to kind of just pick and choose the ones that kind of line up with some stuff. Like Geno's definitely going to get some of his just by natural. I think he needs 180 to 186 passing yards. Like that's probably going to just naturally happen during the course of the game, especially because he's going to be playing against backups. So, you have that. That's the other dynamic we have too. We got not just the halves, the teams that are playing to get in. We also have some teams that are playing against teams that are already punting. Like the Seahawks have a first-year head coach. Like he's not going to go and just like punt this game. They're going to try to close the season out on a positive note against a division rival, against teams that are playing backups. So we have like JSN in the mix, a team that's already like crushed. He already crushed against the Rams once this time this season, and that was against starters. We're probably not going to see Jared Verse play in this game. Like it's probably a decent run out. The Broncos are in a situation too, like where they're playing against backups at home against the Chiefs. That's why they're 10-point favorites. And we're probably not going to see Chris Jones in that game. We're not going to see multiple Chiefs starters. And Bo Nix had 17 fantasy points against the Chiefs starters in Arrowhead as an underdog. So we are like, there's just a lot of like layers this week where you kind of try to hone in on the spots you want to focus on. Because like the one mistake gamers I think make on the full slate is they just try to account for everything. And you just can't do it.
Yeah, not on week 18. TJ, what do you think real quick of some of these incentives? The only one I'm really actively, I think I'm really buying into this week is this Mike Evans one. That's because like Rich said, Baker's in on it. We know that's important to Evans. This is like his legacy. He's never the best wide receiver, but he's one of the best wide receivers every year for such a long time getting these. I think that's extremely important to the Bakers, to the Tampa Bay organization, to Mike Evans. That's pretty much the only one I'm really keying in on this week.
Yeah, I like Evans too, but I think that the incentive thing definitely bumps it up, but it's one of those ones where I would probably be going to a Mike Evans in this spot where Tampa Bay needs a win anyways, and they've never cared about slowing things down when they've scored a lot of points. Like they'll just keep their foot on the throttle the entire game long anyways. And so on a slate where Tampa Bay is one of the few teams where it's like they really got something to play for, I'm planning on loading up on some Mayfield, Evans, McMillan, and co anyways.
Yeah.
It's Pucky week always. So
yeah, week 18. The one thing we don't really have to worry about too much, at least right now, is the weather for week 18. There's a little bit of wind somewhere. There might be a little bit of snow. There might be a little rain, but nothing too crazy, at least on the weather front, according to Kevin Roth here so far.
And if you're on DraftKings, I mean, Mike, because you don't have the luxury of Amon-Ra and Justin Jefferson in that slate. I mean, Mike Evans is by far going to be the most popular pay-up wide receiver on DraftKings because we're probably not going to see Puka Nacua. We're not going to see much of Nico Collins, though D'Amico Ryan says they're going to play some guys, but it's just really hard to see Nico Collins, or at least investing in it from a DFS stance that he plays the whole game. AJ Brown's not going to play. It's just really tough at the top. I think we're going to see on DraftKings, especially, Evans be kind of the de facto pay-up receiver.
And you can get him because you're going to be paying down for some backup running backs for sure this week. What do you got, TJ?
I'm just looking at some receiver stuffs as Rich brings up Mike Evans. I have never seen a bigger disparity between, I mean, I'm not on the Blitz show till tomorrow. We'll be recording that one, but I've never seen a bigger disparity between the RotoGrinders projections and Blitz projections on a player before.
Oh, what is on Mike Evans?
Brian Thomas Jr. It was
wow. The Blitz is all in on Brian Thomas Jr. Yeah.
What do you think Brian Thomas Jr. should be projected for this week, Rich?
Like for ownership or statistically?
Fantasy
points projections on DK.
I mean, probably like from like a median stance, I would say like 16, like 16 and a half.
Yeah, RotoGrinders has him at 17. The Blitz right now has Brian Thomas's median projection is 25.09.
We'll see if that gets dialed down, but it's
his median.
His median.
Yeah,
he's a fantastic play. Double-digit targets each of the past 5 games. Over that span, 35% of the team targets. And he's getting the targets that over that span that we care about. He's got 44% of the team targets in the red zone, and then 63% of their end zone targets over that span. And then we're getting this Colts team, like this game in particular, because it's tricky because it's 2 teams that have nothing to play for. Both teams are eliminated, but it is one of the more intriguing, both these teams are eliminated games from like a stacking stance.
Yeah, I think both teams are going to be going all out in this one for sure. With their players trying to win.
And they played a game earlier this season in the rain, and I believe they scored 60 points in that game.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a little bit. Let's get into some of the game by games. The Jacksonville Indy did not make the slate. Do you want to switch up now? Did Daigle give us these games, and then he left us, Reeves? Is this what happened here, or did you have some choosing of these games?
No, we always let Daigle pick them.
All right, let's talk Panthers Falcons. I'm looking at scores and odds at just the over unders in these. Like you mentioned, all the quarterbacks that we have playing. There's not really a lot to like in here. The Falcons game has a 48. Unless you're on FanDuel, we will talk FanDuel on this Vikings-Lions game to wrap up the show here. But there's another game with a 48 total. That's the Panthers-Falcons. The Falcons do have something to play for. Reeves, take it off. How do you want to approach this game? Do you want to talk Atlanta first? Do you want to talk Carolina first? Or you just want to mix them up and get as many pieces from this game as you can?
I think if you're in general, like my philosophy on that from a top-down stance from this Week 18 slate is I inherently like to play small field onslaught games. So I'm going to try to get some of these game environments just right in general, instead of just trying to pick and choose like which guys in Week 18 are getting like a bump, right? There's definitely gonna be some onesies and a la carte guys I play, but I'm going to focus on these small fields, just like trying to just onslaught some of these games and then just see if we can get it right. Get the game that pops, like Colts, Jaguars, right? Like I'm just going to play the hell out of that game, and hopefully that's the one that gets there with some pieces, like maybe mix in a chalky piece like a Bijan Robinson, right? Because the outside of Brian Thomas Jr., like that game is everyone's really affordable. I mean, all the Colts receivers are affordable. So I think that's what I'm looking for in this game in general too. Like something like a Bijan Robinson, paired with an Adam Thielen coming back, or maybe we do like even Bryce Young involved on that side. My one concern here and TJ, you can definitely chime in too, is that just we've got the 2-game sample with Michael Penix. One game they're on the road in a playoff environment where they're underdogs and they were trailing points in that game. And then we have a game where they were at home and favorites like they are here, where they just grinded Bijan Robinson. And it's like, do we have an opportunity for that just to happen again, especially against this Carolina team, where you look at when these teams played earlier in the season, the Falcons running backs had 37 touches and 213 yards in that game. So is it a situation where we can't even really be like that heavily invested in the passing game? Or are you going to try to get cute and do like a Drake London, Darnell Mooney type of stack?
I don't think I need to on this slate. There's too many other spots that I still like from stacking. And like you said, I'm going to be doing a lot of onslaughts. But for this one, I think I think Bijan can do the onslaught himself. He's just been getting so many touches this entire second half of the season. We don't have to worry about the Algier stuff. Algier still comes in, but I don't care if Algier comes in as long as Bijan's still getting his 22 plus touches every single game. So against Carolina, when they have to win to hold on to that division lead, I'm all in on Bijan. I think he's obviously expensive. You got to pay for him, but I think he's probably the top overall spend on the whole slate.
Yeah, his ownership, it's early in the week, things will change, but 36% ownership for Bijan Robinson, simply because you can't afford him this week. You can afford one or two because there are a couple other cheap running backs that we're going to be talking about a little bit later too. But yeah, I think I'm in the – what do you make of Penix, Reebs? It hasn't been great. There's been a lot of drops. The lefty spin, is it giving the receivers some trouble here? There's been quite a few drops. There's been some inaccurate throws. I saw – a couple things on Twitter or X, whatever we're calling it nowadays, where he's making Anthony Richardson look like an accurate quarterback on some of these things here. What's your overall take on Penix? I'm sort of in TJ's camp where we can just Bijan Robinson, and I would just go with Drake London or Adam Thielen. I don't think you need to go down to the Mooney. It's clearly Drake London is the focus of this offense in the passing game now, where Mooney had his a little earlier in the season. But Bijan, just he looks like the true bell cow, the guy you want to have right now. But what's your overall take on Penix in that passing game?
Yeah, I think just from a fantasy stance, it's hard to expect like a tournament-worthy score, from a guy like Penix, especially, like I said, at home favorite against the Carolina Panthers. They're just going to be able to probably run the football in this game. If you do want to get cute, I mean, you have London. It's still a relatively small sample, the 2-game sample, but London has 32% of the targets from Penix, and then Mooney goes to 16.9%. So it's a pretty clear gap. Like he's doubled him up, 21 targets to 11. And then you've got Kyle Pitts at 7, the next guy. We also seen on Sunday night in that game, Kadero Hodge play over a guy like Ray McLeod for the first time this season, which hadn't happened yet either. So it's a little bit tough, I think, just to get invested on this slate and try to get cute. I think all these quarterbacks, it's just not the slate to get cute with any of these quarterbacks that we named, like that whole list. And there'd be other weeks where you would listen, I know TJ loves his Mac Jones, but
I'll do Mac Jones again. I don't give a damn. I'm doing Mac Jones again.
You could do Mac Jones in that stack.
It's Josh Dobbs week.
Yeah. But yeah, I just don't think you have to get cute with a lot of these quarterbacks this week.
Yeah. TJ, let's go to the next game we wanted to talk about here, which was the Cardinals and 49ers. So we got Josh Dobbs starting in for the 49ers, who
Josh Dobbs revenge.
Yeah. He has revenge against a lot of people here, but he does have that here. Who's he going to be throwing the ball to? Because, I saw Kittle practice today, but you can't expect they're going to rush a lot of these. They're not going to play Debo. You're not going to see these guys for a lot here. Can you trust Dobbs throwing to second and third string wide receivers? He's a 4K quarterback. It lets you get a Bijan, a Mike Evans. It lets you get the guys that you really want into your lineup. Is that something you want to do this week?
If you were to stack with Dobbs, I think Pearsall is probably the guy to go with at only 4,100. Got a whopping 10 targets last week, kind of out of nowhere. And he's going to be a guy that he would, if I was a coach, he would be the one I'd probably want to see the most of in that increased role in this spot. Didn't get to play at the beginning of the season, has shown flashes of looking really good, but hasn't gotten a ton of time based on the amount of weapons they have in that offense. So I think Pearsall would be the one I'd be most interested in stacking with him. But 4K Dobbs, I don't think you need to. This is a guy that likes to run the ball. Even when he just stepped into the game last time, he had 4 rushing attempts. I want to, or no, apologies. I was looking at pass attempts. But like Josh Dobbs, we know he wants to run, and he's only 4K. So I think if you play Dobbs, you're going just Dobbs by himself. And it's like it kind of auto gives you, unfortunately, like the cash style lineup. Like if you're playing Dobbs, you can go Bijan Robinson, you can go Bucky Irving, you can probably get up to Evans or Thomas. And so it does sort of leave you to that cash style lineup. And if you want to get different, stacking is probably the way to do so. But if I'm going Dobbs, he's probably the one guy in my pool that I don't really care to stack.
Yeah. Rich, what do you think about this game? Would you be more apt to play Dobbs with a Pearsall or some other receiver from the 49ers, or would you go with the more known quantities of Arizona, who looks like they're going to close out the season playing this game, their starters the whole way, a Kyler Murray to a Trey McBride or a Marvin Harrison? Of course, we have Michael Carter, who's going to be basically the cheap running back of the week, along with Blake Corum for the Rams here. Is there any reason to want to not play Michael Carter or anybody from the Cardinals here?
I mean, unless we start getting 49ers defensive guys rolled out, I still think you got to operate with at least some trepidation here, especially with what we've seen from the Arizona offense. We also have the all-time shower narrative, though. You know, shout out to Adam Levitan. Remember, Juwan Jennings and Josh Dobbs played college football together. And we saw when Dobbs came in, he targeted Juwan Jennings on 75% of his throws on Monday. It was a very small sample when he came in, but
Jennings and Pearsall double stacks, baby.
You might have to do the double. Brit too. Jennings is another one of these guys. If you're looking for, he's 77 yards short of his first 1,000-yard season of his career too. So we'll see if they try to push him too. I saw Debo didn't practice, so maybe Debo doesn't play. But maybe you do the doubles because Jennings.
I'll do it for sure. It doesn't take much to twist my arm to get me to stack up a shitty quarterback.
Michael Carter, I have no interest in playing. I don't think you need him on this slate, especially against the 49ers front, unless I say like we start seeing guys get rolled out. But he's just I just don't think he's a necessity on the slate.
Even at like 4,700, what are we'll talk position by position. We got Blake Corum and a couple other guys in here. Well, what about if you can, Trey McBride got in the end zone, when he gets in the end zone, it's like 50 fantasy points because he's getting targeted every single play, it seems like here. Is he someone 6,500, right? Is he someone you'd want to reach for this week at a position where, I mean, you're just it's Brock Bowers, it's Trey McBride. We're probably not going to get a full game from a George Kittle, Jonnu Smith, it falls off real fast. Is he someone you want to prioritize, or are you going to try to just pick your favorite 3K tight end and get a Mike Evans and a Bijan in every lineup?
I mean, you can always get to McBride if you have the salary. There's definitely more pieces I always want to get to than him. But yeah, you can always go after him. It's just in general, this game has just like a lot of unknowns. You got the cheap 49ers guys that you can play because, Dobbs is a mobile quarterback at 4K. It's not even like one of these other guys that we're talking like Garoppolo, right? Or Wentz, Trubisky. Like we've got a guy that we know could give you rushing production. That's what makes him a little bit more appealing from that group of guys. And he does have some stacking partners that are super cheap and that I mean, what does the double cost you? I mean, the double on DraftKings is you can get under 14K, right? Under 14K on DraftKings is all three of those guys. I mean,
right now
for them to 3x, what is it? 13.9?
Yeah.
Yeah, so for them to 3x, they give you it's a very low bar for you to get 40
too, and you still have 6K per position, including defense.
For you to get 40 DraftKings points out of those 3 49ers is actually feasible.
Yeah, 100%, especially when you consider how ugly tight end is today. Run it back with McBride on the other side. You play a cheap defense, you still have all the money in the world to do whatever the heck with your team there. And McBride just kind of makes the perfect run back. Because looking at tight end today, we'll get there. But outside of McBride and Bowers, it is disgusting.
Yeah. You got to go to Zach Ertz and his 9 receptions he needs. And all the narrative comes through. And other than that, you're pretty much praying at tight end. Let's jump to FanDuel. I wish DraftKings would have made an exception this week, Reeves, to include the Detroit Minnesota game, but I don't know, they didn't. But on FanDuel, right, I'm playing a lot on FanDuel this week because this is the game we want. I bet Jahmyr Gibbs about 500 different ways, combined pass or rushing receiving yards, as long as rush, your favorite staple, opened at 16.5. I hit that. It's fine at 17.5 too. Justin Jefferson in 4 games in Detroit in his career has 700. Give me just a second here. In his 4 games in Detroit, let's see, 730 receiving yards in 4 games. Just absolute monster games there. Detroit's given up passing yards left and right here. This looks like all the fireworks you would want. I think this has to be the highest total of the year at 56 or 57.5. I mean, this is what we want football to be for every team, and we can only play it on FanDuel on the main slate here. What are some specific pieces you want to see in this game? Is everyone in play? Do we just want to focus on the passing game, the run game? Where do you see that game playing out? Because this is like the game we want all year long.
Yeah, if you're playing on FanDuel and you're ahead when the afternoon games end, and you don't want to be checking the scores because there's going to be some points. Some PMR is going to be available for a lot of people on FanDuel, stacking up this game. And FanDuel, I think, is the site where you're going to see more of the cheaper running backs played necessarily than DraftKings, because you want to get more. You want to get to Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra builds, Darnold builds. These teams already scored 60 points combined when they played in week 7, and that was a healthy, version of the Lions team. And you look at the Lions now over the past 5 games, they've allowed the highest yards per pass attempt over the past 5 weeks in the NFL. They're 28th in touchdown rate allowed. And Darnold actually just ran like a little bit cold in the touchdown department in that first game, but he completed 22 of 27 passes, just under 10 yards per pass attempt in that game. It was just one of 5 games this season where he didn't throw multiple passing touchdowns. So the way the Lions are running now, the thing you have to love too about what the Lions are doing is that even though they've gotten beaten up on defense, Aaron Glenn has swerved into just saying, we're not going to calibrate this thing and try to protect these guys, these backups. We're going to keep playing even more aggressively. Over the past 5 weeks, they're actually 2nd in the NFL in rate of man coverage and 3rd in blitz rate. So they're just like getting even more aggressive with guys banged up that we love. And when these teams did play in week 7, they played man coverage on 54% of the snaps. They blitzed Sam Darnold 42% of the time. And in particular, that's been like the Justin Jefferson, like the lead. He has 32% of team targets, 3.1 yards per outrun against man coverage, 36% of the team targets, and over 4 yards per outrun when Sam Darnold has been blitzed this season. And Carlton Davis played in that first matchup. He's not going to be on the field this week. So, yeah, I mean, this game has just a little bit of everything. We got a bunch of stats we could cover, but, I mean, this is a definite smoking if you got him game. Over on FanDuel.
Justin Jefferson, I wrote up on Scores and Odds at 89.5. It looks like it's up to 90. That's gonna cruise into the mid 90s by the end of the week, Reeves. I think that's a pretty reasonable shot to take an over on that one. Especially, I mean, those splits in Detroit, I don't know if they mean a lot, but he's just had monster games against Detroit, specifically in Detroit, but even throughout the rest of his career. TJ, what do you want in this game for FanDuel, right? On what about the run game? Right, because Gibbs, last week, he seeded 10 running back touches and 10 running back carries and 2 running back receptions when they were clearly not going all out in maybe the second half. I think, this is going to be, how many touches does Gibbs not get from the backfield? Maybe like 4 or 5 in this game, right? Like, how do you want to play him? Would you play him over Bijan on FanDuel?
Oh, yeah. Gibbs over everybody by far. With no Montgomery, Gibbs without Montgomery for me is just like I would play him like McCaffrey 2 years ago kind of thing. Like, if not more. Like, his stats this year per touch are just absolutely unbelievable. He's been by far the most electric running back in all of football. And so now he's getting 100% of the backfield carries. I don't think in a close game that they want to win. I don't think Craig Robinson's Reynolds, thank you.
Reynolds,
I don't think Craig Reynolds is going to be involved because I think Jameson Williams would be maybe the only other guy that would touch from the quote-unquote backfield in some wonky scenario. if there's another rush, I would guess it's Williams, but Gibbs is going to get 100% of the targets, or 100% of the carries, I would guess. I typically don't like picking running backs against Minnesota, but in this scenario, I don't care, where both of these teams are just going to be getting the ball to their best players because they want the bye. It would be so tempting to me if I were like just running a ton of lineups on FanDuel to just say 100% Gibbs. I want to play 100% Gibbs. I'll hit the lock button, and then I will play at least one of Justin Jefferson or Jordan Addison in every single lineup that I play. And just not, regardless of if it's 10, 20, 150, lock in Gibbs, lock in one of those two receivers, both if I'm playing Darnold. I wonder how doable that is from like a lineup construction perspective to actually do, like, because Darnold is the highest projected quarterback in the RotoGrinders projections this week for FanDuel. Exact same thing for the Blitz. Is it feasible to actually do a Darnold double stack with Gibbs? Is that like, it's possible? It's like fully a possible thing to do.
Cheap running backs you can throw in. I'm sure there's going to be some random cheap wide receiver that certainly has a big game across all of these teams who are playing backups of backups and things like that. And Rich, I want to throw the same question to you I threw to TJ. Bijan or Gibbs? Gibbs is also $400 cheaper. I mean, Gibbs is basically, he is prime CMC if he gets every single touch. That seems, I think I would, even against a tough run defense and Bijan going up against Carolina, how would you break that down if you were forced to choose between one of them on FanDuel this week?
I mean, I think Gibbs should be close to 10K. Like TJ said, I think he should be handled like Christian McCaffrey, especially because, he's had 27 and 22 touches the past two games without David Montgomery. We saw him in this first matchup have 160 total yards. He already lit Minnesota up. And we've seen Minnesota against some good backfields allow production anyways. I mean, they allowed 2 touchdowns to the Green Bay backs last week. We saw them face Atlanta 3 weeks ago, and they gave up 155 rushing yards to them. They gave up 100 yards to Jordan Mason earlier in the year. Like, some good running backs have had productive games against them. And Gibbs is just such a that dual threat entity, like it being used like a CMC, that is just offers so much upside. And to me, the separator too, just from a heads up, is not just the $400 in salary. It's the game environment, right? Like the potential game environment here. Not that I don't think that Carolina and Atlanta can be a competitive game, but this game has potential to have, 60, 70 plus points scored in it. And we just want to use that be a catalyst to get more of a more ownership towards Gibbs. Like, I'm with TJ on FanDuel. I don't see any reason to make a lineup on FanDuel without Jahmyr Gibbs.
Yeah, it's just he's too good, too electric, and all those touches he ceded last week, I think they're going to come back into his pocket, and he could push for 30 plus touches in this game if it's as electric as we think.
But the toughest part is you can't play everyone in this game.
Yeah.
That's
all right.
Let me get a big underdog 2-player card on Jahmyr Gibbs, 16.5 longest rush. And
it's still up at 16.5 there.
Oh, underdog, it always is. It almost never bumps up to 17.
All right, I'm going up there.
I've been sending Reebs the screenshots. It's like underdog sends me every week like that. You have bet your maximum $500 on Jahmyr Gibbs. Pick him plays. Please pick someone else.
Yeah, I'm gonna go. We're going
6.5 receptions for Jefferson and 16.5 rushing yards for Gibbs. Like that's my go-to.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna go position by position in just a minute to round out the main slate. First, I got to pay some bills. I got to tell you guys about RotoGrinders Combo Lite. The holiday season brings us some huge DFS contests for basketball and football. We want you to have a massive holiday takedown. We're taking $10 off your first month of Combo Lite. That means access to our SimLabs lineup building tool and content from your favorite DFS analysts for just $19.99. It's an affordable subscription that has everything you need to build effective lineups. Score a big win this holiday season with RG Combo Lite. I also need to tell you guys about Splash. If you haven't signed up for Splash Sports, there's still time. You can use promo code ROTO10. And when you play $100 in Quick Picks, you'll get another $50. Make sure to go check out Splash. They've been great hosts of a lot of season-long things. And you can get in there and play the Quick Picks as well. And also, if you're in the sports betting world, there's Props and Pick'em. You can get an expert picks for all of your favorite sites with Props and Pick'em. Our elite sports betting and fantasy Pick'em package features bets and analysis from your favorite RG experts, myself included. Props and Pick'em also includes tools and data powered by our hardworking projections team. Don't make a bet without it. All right. Main slate, quarterback. I'll go TJ. Do you want to lead off a segment here, TJ? Let's go quarterback. Main slate. What are we looking at? We'll give Reebs a break. We'll let TJ jump into the main seat.
It's my time to shine, baby. And so this is the probably tightest quarterback pool I'm going to have in quite a few weeks. Like the way maybe this should, as I grab my dog because he's been annoying at my feet, asking for some attention. So he wants some camera time too. For me, this is like maybe a strategy that I shouldn't be going with because it hasn't worked overly well the year for me. This is my first year in the last, it was 3 straight years with at least one big 6-figure win in a GPP, and I didn't get that yet this year. So maybe week 18 is going to be my week. But typically what I've done this year is have a really tight running back pool and then just play a bunch of different stacks with different quarterbacks with my really tight running back pool. This week, I don't know if that's going to be the case. It's only Wednesday, but I've already managed to narrow it down to 8 players. I'm probably going to try and get it tighter than that. But Dobbs, I think, probably is just because he's a rushing quarterback at 4K flat. The cash game guy you're looking at this week, I think optimally Baker Mayfield or Joshua Dobbs are going to be the 2 guys. Mayfield's going to be my favorite guy to pay up for of the entire group. 7 is my entire pool. But Mayfield, Nix, Geno Smith, Flacco, and Jones, just because I really like that game. And I didn't realize I still had accidentally Tanner McKee in there. So we got it down to 6. We have got it down to 6 guys for the Sunday slate. Mayfield, Nix, Geno, Joe Flacco, Mac Jones, Joshua Dobbs. Baker and Joshua Dobbs are definitely going to be my favorites of the group. But Mac Jones and Bo Nix, I think, are going to be the 2 that are going to be sneaky this week that I want to get the most of.
Reeves, anyone else you'd want to throw in there? I mean, to me, it's, Baker at the top for, I want to say almost guaranteed production with how well he's been playing there. You've got Dobbs on the cheap end if you want to try to boost up the skill position players. I don't know. Outside the guys TJ mentioned, it gets ugly very, very quickly unless you think Washington is going to go all out to win it. Washington should probably want to win this game against Dallas. 7,800 for him on this slate. Probably not going to play him. It's just, I hope the Chargers have something to play for. What is it? The Steelers have to lose and then the Chargers win and then the Chargers get to go play Houston. So if that happens, we'll have Herbert in there with some of his targets here, which would be a nice boost to the player pool on Sunday. What are you looking at?
Yeah, I have 6 guys right now, and the 2 are only FanDuel only, Goff and Darnold. So the only guys that TJ didn't mention, because I had Baker on there. I did have Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix on there, just because Dan Quinn already said that his quote was, "We're gonna fight like hell to secure the 6th seed." Which actually matters in the NFC. It's like a pretty big deal to be, facing, Tampa Bay instead. So that would be a rematch from week 1 if we get it, but that would be a fun DFS game to play too, in that opening round, wild card round. But I do have him on the list just because we've seen the heater he's been on. Mm-hmm. We've seen touchdown regression find him. His past 5 games, he's averaging 30 DraftKings points per game.
That's a good call. I didn't realize they still had something to play for Washington. I thought they were kind of locked in, but Daniel definitely has got to be in there.
Yeah, so I had him on there, and then I had Bo Nix for the fact that he's a wild card, right? It could be a situation where the Chiefs don't put up a fight and Bo Nix doesn't have to do a lot, or it's a thing where he's cooking against these reserves. We're probably not going to see Chris Jones, McDuffie's not going to play in this game, and when these teams played in Week 10 in Arrowhead on the road, he had 17 fantasy points. So can he flirt with 20 plus? And he's another guy that has stacking partners that are pretty clear, because you can play Sutton, who we know is going for another incentives. And then you have this up and coming hot streak that we've seen Marvin Mims be on at 4,600 and 5,600 on FanDuel. We've seen him get bumped up to right around just under 50% of the team dropbacks. He has a catch of 50 or more yards in 3 of his past 4 games. He's got a catch of at least 37 yards in 5 of his past 6 games. So he's just a big play guy, and it's just not it's just not a stack that's going to break the bank. And then I, from an onslaught perspective, am interested in the Colts game just from like the small field stuff of playing, probably Flacco doubles with Brian Thomas Jr. as a clear bring back.
Yeah, would you want to, if you were looking, I'm just looking at some of the quarterbacks that are available once you get past the guys you actually want to play. Would you consider Mac Jones on the opposite side of that game as someone you'd throw probably more for like a large field tournament? It's to him to Brian Thomas, but then you run it back with a Pittman, maybe a Alec Pierce, somebody like that, or even a Jonathan Taylor could have a monster game in this one. Not too involved in the passing game, but you never know. Would Mac Jones make a list for a large field tournament for you, Reeves?
I think on this slate he probably won't make mine as much, but he'll definitely be on TJ's. Car. TJ loves some Mac Jones.
I got the idea spot after I stacked up Trevor Lawrence, and I still did really well in my single entry contest, but I stacked up Trevor Lawrence when he got hurt in the first quarter. If I got Mac Jones's points from Trevor Lawrence in the game he left, I would have won the Millie Maker. For a second time, I was 1v1 off of a Millie Maker this year.
The reason I prefer Flacco on that side of that game is because he's easier to double. I think he's more attractive to double stack than it's just Mac Jones and Brian Thomas Jr.
Yeah, Reeves, let's go to running back. So you were a little down on Michael Carter, who is drawing the third highest ownership basically here to start off the week at RotoGrinders here. Now he's 4,700 on DraftKings. I know he's cheap on FanDuel too. If you don't like him, we obviously talked about Bijan Robinson up at the top in that Atlanta game. Jonathan Taylor is a nice consolation prize. He's going to need to find the end zone at least once, if not twice, have 100+ yards to probably make it worth his while. If you're not on Carter, who are some of the other guys? I know there's a Blake Corum. There's a couple other cheap guys you might want to mix in here. Let's talk about some of these junk running backs people might not have heard of until week 18.
Well, if you still want to pay for a good player with Bijan Robinson, obviously the clear guy would be Bucky Irving, and it counters a lot of the Baker stuff. Also, Bucky, the way the Tampa Bay has scored points, you can play Bucky in Baker stacks as well in those onslaughts. The Buccaneers are second in the NFL in amount of games that they scored 24 or more points this season. So basically 3 touchdowns plus is what we're counting on from the Buccaneers in this game. And, coming out of the week 12 bye in Bucky Irving's healthy games, 18, 28, 17, 19, 24 opportunities against the Saints team that's 30th in yards per carry allowed to running backs, 31st in success rate. When these teams played in week 6, remember Rachaad White, this was the first Bucky Irving game, and it turned into a Sean Tucker game. But they combined for 300 yards, Bucky Irving and Sean Tucker in this game. So definitely Bucky Irving if you want to pay for him. I think when you get to the cheap guys, there's one mid-range guy I think that counteracts the one stack that we talked about that I think is interesting on this slate is Isaac Guerendo, because he still has a lot to show out for the staff. He's had 100% and 93% of the backfield touches his last 2 healthy games against an Arizona team that we've picked on in backfield production this season. And then when you get to the cheap guys, we've got Ray Davis. We're expecting a decent run out for him. We probably see James Cook come in for his 19 yards. He needs 19 yards for 1,000. They probably get him in those 19 and get him out of the game. We've got Blake Corum, who Sean McVay talked about, getting him an extended workload. And we have the wild card, I think, on this slate is Will Shipley for the Eagles, who looks like he's trending to clear concussion protocol. He practiced today. Because I don't think they're going to play Kenneth Gainwell a lot in this game either. And Kenneth Gainwell, I know in early stuff is tracking to be popular, but I don't think he's going to play a lot in this game. I think you're going to see a lot of Will Shipley. Will Shipley is $4,100 on FanDuel. If you want to play your Lions and Vikings, that's a way to get there. He can get you to an Amon-Ra Justin Jefferson team because you don't see $4,100 running backs. So we have that spot. I will say with those 3 rookie running backs, the one thing that you have to factor in, because they are cheap, but they're also going to be playing with reserves. And, it's not like in week 6 where Ray Davis filled in for James Cook against the Jets and he had 150 yards on 23 touches. There's going to be no Josh Allen. There's going to be no Deion Dawkins. He's going to be playing with backup linemen too. So just something to throw into the equation in case you're just trying to chase that box score. But the price is right for all of those guys. I think on FanDuel, especially just because you don't have the Lions and Vikings on the DraftKings slate. That's why I think you can just play like Bijan Bucky. You can get the Brian Thomas. You can just build a regular lineup on DraftKings this week. I think that's really good. But on FanDuel, I think you need to get a little more creative as you play more large field to get to the Vikings and Lions guys.
TJ, you have a couple of favorite running backs. Obviously, the Bijan, Bucky, that's going to be a very popular combo. Anything you do to combat that?
Yeah, Bijan and Bucky will definitely be my highest owned guys. I think Zach Charbonnet makes for a really awesome tournament play at $6,700. No Kenneth Walker. He's getting almost all the touches. McIntosh just gets a little, but he's had 2 bad games in a row, but he still had 18 touches last game against Chicago. Now he gets a matchup against a bunch of Rams backup players. So I think Charbonnet is looking really good. J.K. Dobbins at low ownership, I think, is an interesting play. Could easily just run all over the Raiders as he is trying to. They've been very publicly talking about how they really want him to win Comeback Player of the Year this year because they're so impressed with all the work that he's put in and the production.
I got bad news for him.
I know he doesn't really fit the new criteria, which I feel like the new criteria is the opposite of what it should be. But
I think Joe Burrow's won that one.
Yeah, fair. But Dobbins, I like for tournaments. I love the Garendo call. Of the cheap running backs, the only other one I'd probably want to throw in there would be another rookie that I think you can play, Carson Steele at 4,700. But again, I'm kind of with Rich that I don't know how much I need these super cheap running backs. I would definitely that's one of the reasons why I like Mac Jones, Joe Flacco, Joshua Dobbs, is because I can double stack these guys, not just with 2 of their receivers, but 2 cheap receivers. And double stacking them with 2 cheap receivers will allow me to get to as much of Irving, as much of Bijan as possible. I do actually think I'm going to prioritize Bucky over Bijan. Bucky's just been my favorite running back in the league to play all year, every single day. And so that's not going to change in week 18 when they're playing a horrific defense that they need to win. I'm going to be loading up on Bucky. And going back to the quarterback position, same with Rich mentioned, I think you compare him with Mayfield. Tampa Bay is one of those. Tampa Bay and Detroit are the 2 teams that I don't think there's a limit to how many players you can stack them with. And we've seen that with the 8 Detroit players winning a Millie Maker one year. And if you just played Baker and Evans and McMillan stack last week with Baker going off, you still probably weren't cashing. I think the quad stacks are what's in play with Baker this week, where we have such a terrible tight end slate, but you have $3,200 Payne Durham, and what the hell was the other guy's name who kept catching all the passes at tight end last week? You punch there, you play Mike Evans, you play Jalen McMillan, you play Bucky Irving and Baker Mayfield. Do your Baker Mayfield quad stacks. And when they score 40 points against this terrible, putrid Saints defense, you're cooking when no other team on the slate puts up more than 28.
All right. Let's go to receiver, Rich. So Mike Evans, highest owned wide receiver. I think that's going to be pretty clear this week with all the incentives, all the talk, the matchup, everything points to Mike Evans having a big game. It's early in the week. Try to guess RotoGrinders number 2 projected wide receiver. This is not this is someone filling in. This is a backup. Who would be your favorite backup wide receiver? I don't know if this is going to be correct by the time the week comes through.
Trying to do this because Dean does this too. So it's got to be one of the Colts guys for sure, right?
Whittington from the Rams.
Oh, Jordan. Oh, okay.
You think that's going to stick? How are you playing this with Garoppolo? I think he'll probably drop down a little bit. You do need, right? If you're, it helps to have a cheap receiver, even if you go Dobbs.
80% ownership for Jordan Whittington. Yuck.
Yeah, yes. I don't think that. I don't think
so
that'll.
I think the difference between the wide receivers versus the running backs, because we know the running back position, even with we talked about some of the guys playing with the backups, it's still an opportunity game. Opportunities can still lead to fantasy points to running backs, but we're still contingent on a lot of these reserve wide receivers now attached to these quarterbacks that maybe we're not gonna have any type of run out, right? If you're trying to do no one's probably playing any of the Eagles guys like Johnny Wilson or Jahan Dotson, but even if you're playing Whittington, you're counting on Garoppolo and what kind of game is Garoppolo going to have to get you there, where we actually have cheaper wide receivers attached to functional quarterbacks. I mean, well, I think Dobbs is probably a little bit safer to lean on for either of the 49ers guys. Well, Jennings is just a better receiver too than Jordan Whittington. But, we talked about Marvin Mims. You could play Jalen McMillan still with Baker. That's just
and
cheaper.
the Rams have like 12 receivers they can still put in there. Like Tyler Johnson, Tutu Atwell. Like, who knows if Whittington's going to get more than 200 targets.
What's leading into it is Whittington has a really good projection to start out the week, so that's bumping up the ownership. I would imagine by the time Sunday comes around, we'll either have more news and the projection will be correct, right? It'll be good because Whittington's starting and he's going to be the focal point of the offense. We'll get things like that, or maybe that'll come down and his ownership will come down. It's just because he's a 33
clear elite $4,500 wide receiver one who's currently not even projecting for 1% ownership.
And who would that be?
Olamide Zaccheaus.
He is. Terry McLaurin, who? Right. What do you make of this, Reebs, of this Washington passing game here and how Zaccheaus has sort of emerged as like the man at the moment?
And we've seen this back half of the year. Terry McLaurin's actually led the team in targets, I believe, 2 of the past 8 games, because Noah Brown had a 4-game streak where he out-targeted Terry McLaurin too. So it's been kind of consistent that someone else has been drawing some opportunities. It also is interesting that it coincides with like the best that Jaden Daniels has played from a fantasy stance, like all that touchdown regression stuff too. So they've been really spreading the ball around as well. But I mean, you can't expect him to keep running this hot in touchdowns. But I don't mind if you do fit him into your Daniel stacks at all.
Yeah.
I'm a lot more hesitant to chase these cheap punt wide receivers that are like clear punts versus the punt running backs, because there are other good wide receivers that have been productive that we can just keep playing down here.
Yeah, you mentioned JSN earlier in the show. You've got
both Colts guys still too.
Yeah, Pittman, Pierce, or what about Downs? Is Downs or is it Pierce is your wide receiver 2 for the Colts now?
I still prefer Downs from like an opportunity stance, but I have no problem with anyone chasing, Pierce from the upside stance, from what he represents from a per target basis. And every touchdown Pittman scored this year is from Flacco.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like the connection. I think I played. I didn't play too much last week, but I did use some Pittman, so that did end up turning out reasonably well here. All right, TJ, let's play rank wide receivers up at the top. Mike Evans number 1, Brian Thomas number 2, or Malik Neighbors number 2 for you?
Thomas 2 for me, but I would even consider, just because of the price difference, ranking Brian Thomas 1. Like Evans is the clear raw point projecting guy, but I do think I might prioritize Brian Thomas over Mike Evans because I'm already prioritizing Bucky Irving, and you get that little bit of a salary saving difference. Now you can absolutely, even if you're not playing Baker, you can absolutely play Bucky Irving and Mike Evans together anyways. But I do think Brian Thomas, I'm going to prioritize a little bit over Mike Evans. They are still going to be 1 and 2 for me, though. Outside of them, I think like Neighbors is still going to be number 3. Like, geez, it's kind of crazy that, Philly's probably going to be playing a bunch of backups. Drew Lock just had the best game of his career and just loading up Malik Neighbors with targets, and we're not really having any interest in that connection here. I don't think I would go Lock. But Neighbors is still super interesting with 14 targets in his last 3 games. Lock's going to him a ton. And while Drew Lock is not good, it's not a downgrade over Daniel Jones. It's certainly an upgrade over Tommy DeVito. So Neighbors is up there as well. I think I would put those 3 well ahead of like Lad McConkey, Terry McLaurin, Drake London, that range for me. I'd rather spend all the way up or get to some cheaper guys, because I don't mind the 6K range. Like Sutton, Adam Thielen, Jackson Smith, Jigma, those are going to be my 3 favorites. But I would rather go sub 6K to, like we talked about, those indie guys, Pittman, Downs, Alec Pierce even got a ton of targets with Joe Flacco back last week. Reeves, I didn't see his snap share. I'm not sure if that was something that you have somewhat readily available, but 9 targets for Alec Pierce with Flacco, I thought was super interesting. DK Metcalf at only 5,600, and then the Juwan Jennings shower narrative. Like I'm all aboard. Load me up some. You don't need to give me an excuse to play Juwan Jennings. I've been loading him up all year, and it's been disappointing lately. But anything to get back on the Jennings train, and then I'll take some shots on some cheapies. Like McMillan probably is my favorite. I already talked about Pierce, but Zaccheaus, PJ Washington, Ricky Pearsall. Since I'm playing their quarterbacks, I'm going to be playing those guys with them.
Rich, any wide receivers you want to talk about that stand out that we haven't really mentioned yet?
No, not like onesies. Like JSN would be like the one onesie where I didn't mention his quarterback, but TJ mentioned having Geno in his pool. So like the guys in your player pool are basically going to dictate where you're going with some of these, back end guys. So if you're playing Daniels, you're going to mix in some Zacchaeus, maybe even Ertz if you get down to there. If you're playing Bo Nix, you're going to mix in Mims with Sutton, and then Jennings and Pearsall with Josh Dobbs if you're playing those guys. I'm also with TJ just for the Brian Robinson, just over Evans stuff for the reason he laid out is that you still can play Evans and Bucky and stacks. And then just Thomas has just been the absolute Jaguar offense for the last month. So no one's playing any leverage against you either. Like, no, you never, even if Travis Etienne scores a touchdown, it's not going to matter because nobody's playing Travis Etienne or Tank Bigsby.
What a letdown season from Travis
Brenton
Etienne.
Strange has just purely disappeared off the face
Once
of the
he
earth.
fumbled, he got shadow realmed 2 weeks ago against the
That was
Raiders.
wild. Like 0 targets again last week. Like he's just gone.
Yeah, he got shadow realmed.
All right, tight end TJ. We mentioned this a little earlier. It's Brock Bowers. It's Trey McBride. Which one would you rather play this week? After that, it gets really ugly. So let's try to break down the top here. If you have to pick between Bowers or McBride, who you got?
McBride. I've been on the McBride over Bowers train kind of all year long, and I'm still going to be on that with this one. Now, Bowers has just gone absolutely crazy, but it's just kind of, I don't know. I don't know why I prefer him if I'm being straight up honest with you, other than I just like Trey McBride better than Brock Bowers. I don't really like this spot for the Raiders against the Chargers. Jacoby Myers is a receiver that's going to be picking up some ownership again like he always does. I don't think I'm going to go there, though. I'm just not on the O'Connell, Bowers, Myers train this week.
I'm definitely on McBride. Yeah, I'm definitely on McBride over Bowers against that tough Chargers defense. I'll take McBride. Yeah. Maybe he'll touchdown regression. Here it comes for him.
To be clear, Bowers is still my number 2.
Yeah,
but McBride above him.
Yeah, Rich, where do you stand between those two this week?
So it depends. I think what's going to happen is I want to see what happens on Saturday first before I make the call just between, how much I'm going to try to jam McBride versus Bowers, because Harbaugh already said that while they'd love to be the 5th seed, he also said that he will do what's best for the team. That's kind of what he said. Like, that was his quote. So if the Steelers win that game on Saturday, the Chargers can't do it. They can't move.
Mm-hmm.
So if the Steelers do win that game Saturday night, that maybe like switches some things. Like maybe we get like Derwin James resting, or you get some of his pieces. We also have the long shot that Brock Bowers can break the all-time tight end reception record. He needs 9 catches to break the Zach Ertz's record for 116 tight end catches in a season. He has 9 or more catches. He needs 9 catches to break it. He has 9 or more catches in 6 games this year. So it's not completely outlandish that he could get there against a really zone-based team. So and Aiden O'Connell, when Aiden O'Connell has been in the game, he's really fed Bowers over Myers. So if the Steelers win that game, I think it could shift me to being a little more interested in Bowers, but that's just I want to stick a pin in it.
That's a really good point. And I think it's worth noting too, just from a greater lineup construction standpoint, unless I'm playing one of their quarterbacks, I think I like both Brock Bowers and Trey McBride over Terry McLaurin. Maybe Ladd McConkey, Drake London, Cortland Sutton, Adam Thielen. So if I have a mid 6K price tag remaining for a flex position, I'm probably choosing between Zach Charbonnet, J.K. Dobbins, and one of those 2 tight ends going just doubling up. I think it's very viable to double spend a tight end this week, which is not something I really ever consider, because usually if I'm going double tight end, it's for a salary saving purpose. But on this really weird slate,
we ran down the receivers too. With if you're on DraftKings, because that's where you'd want to do it with those 2 guys anyways, because they've both been such PPR mavens all year. Because we've seen McBride and Bowers have the 20-point DraftKings game without a touchdown this year multiple times. And we ran down the receivers. You don't have Jefferson, you don't have Amon-Ra. So it is probably more viable to do that, especially when you just listed off those 6K receivers.
No, there's all of those. I'll happily play Sutton with Nix. I'll happily play McLaurin with Jaden Daniels. I'll happily play Thielen as a run back for Bijan Robinson. But again, I like Bowers and McBride better than all of them.
Yeah, and then
Rich,
if you're on
what do you-
FanDuel, you just have the two dudes that are playing in the late games.
Yeah.
Rich, what are you doing at tight end if you're not playing one of Trey McBride or Brock Bowers? Because I mean, this is just
It's
this
bad.
is the worst I think I've seen tight end look all season long, with all of the teams that have nothing to play for and backups playing. I mean, this is ugly. Is there any Hail Marys you got for us?
And I think if I'm playing Daniels, I'll probably pepper in some of the Zach Ertz stuff on DraftKings, probably more so than I would on FanDuel. But then it's just a disaster. And if you could punt again with Payne Durham if Otten's out and just hope you luck box into a touchdown. You still have kind of
Devin Culp.
What's that?
Don't forget about Devin Culp.
Yeah, Devin Culp down there. It's just bad. I think you just want to pay up for one of those guys. Then if you're on FanDuel, you have the luxury of being able to play Hawkinson or Laporta also in your player pool, and just that, just take the game environment on. We also will see if Alex Anzalone returns for the Lions this week. I saw he was practicing today, but his status was still, up in the air. But there are some kind of positive stuff for Hawkinson too, who didn't play in the first game between these teams. So you have the luxury of having two better tight ends in the player pool on FanDuel than just DraftKings. It's really bad though. It's awful.
Would you want to like a Noah Gray, right? A guy who's proven he can do it this year, but now it's with Carson Wentz. Is that someone?
I think it's fine.
His projection is 3.5. I mean, it's got to be more than that by the time game time comes around. He's not a 3.5 point tight end.
I don't think so. Like, if they're benching starters, I would consider him one of the guys that's likely going to be sat too, because he's
a part of the base.
They run so much tight end offense. He's not their backup tight end. He is a starter in their offense.
I guess I can see your thoughts on that one. We have to see. You got to play somebody, right?
They have
Juwan Johnson, I think, is pretty interesting against this Tampa Bay team that, they're going to be like, New Orleans is going to have to throw a ton because they're going to be down 4 touchdowns by the end of this first quarter. And so, like, Juwan Johnson had 10 targets, 10 receptions from Spencer Rattler last week. And if there's we love targeting passing against, we don't want to play the New Orleans passing offense, but in theory, we love targeting passing offenses against Tampa Bay, and they are most vulnerable in the middle of the field as opposed to the outside. So it's a pretty darn good spot for Juwan Johnson, as terrible as that offense is. If he's going to be getting 5 to 10 targets on a crappy tight end week, sign me up at 36K or 3.6K. And I was originally going to say, hey, and Foster Moreau too, for the exact same thing that I just said. He had 5 targets last week. He's been consistently getting 3, 4, 5, as well as some red zone targets. But with the price only being $400 difference between Juwan and Foster Moreau, I would just way rather go to Juwan Johnson, since nobody's looking like they're going to play him anyway.
Reeves, you want to give people a 1 or 2 minute recap of what's going on, a couple of your favorite games, a couple of your favorite players? We'll wrap this up for week 18 and have a much better playoff round when the players we want to actually play are playing NFL games.
Yeah, I would, like I said, I think similar to Noah Gray, I feel very similar to Kenneth Gainwell, where I don't think he's going to play as much as probably people will think the direct backup will play. I think you're going to see Peyton Hendershot play a lot of snaps for the Chiefs on Sunday for sure. Like I said, I think Will Shipley's going to end up playing more than Kenneth Gainwell in that game too, for the Eagles. I just think that those teams are going to want to see what they have in those guys and give a chance to see some snaps played by those guys they haven't played. And those guys are part of the actual functionality of the base offense, even though they're technically reserves. Noah Gray still has a 50% snap share with Travis Kelce. He's still playing, especially heavily in the red zone. So I do think Peyton Hendershot's going to probably play a lot on Sunday. But yeah, from a game perspective, we kind of talked about, some of the early games, Jacksonville, Indy indoors, kind of a gross game on paper for teams that don't have to put anything to play for, but could be high scoring, and it has a lot of pieces that fit. We talked about Atlanta, Carolina being a game that could be potentially, a little bit more competitive and has a higher total. If you're on FanDuel, you have the luxury of just Vikings, Lions, and just closing out that Sunday night with hopefully what we're hoping is just a really great way to end the football season with the highest total we've had all season. And we ran through all the stacks and stuff. So it's a weird week. I will say the one thing we talked about a lot of players. you really just want to focus on tightening up your player pool the best you can on a slate like this. Like when you try to account for too many things happening because there's such a wide range, it's where you're going to end up making a mistake. Like you're going to thin your player pool out, and it's going to inherently pull down some of your scores. So find the pieces you like for sure.
If you guys like the movie talk, again, apologies. We will be pushing that to next week. Hopefully Dean's back. Daigle's back from India. We know Reebs will always be here too. Thanks for putting up with me and TJ for week 18 of the DFS Pick 6. As always, Reebs, thanks for joining us again. I truly appreciate you and Daigle on the show, along with Dean. One of the few things I listen to each and every week. You are the man, my friend.
We're still doing one more, at least. We know that.
Yeah, so yeah, absolutely for the first week, if not two for the playoffs for sure, because there's a bunch of games coming up. But other than that, thanks to everybody for watching. Hit the like on the way out, or if you're listening on replay, click the like button. TJ, thanks for filling in, dude. You're a busy man. Thanks to Reebs. Thanks to everybody for watching. I'm Brit, and we out ya.